There are some players, though, that have an awful lot on the line as they head into the series, into the postseason here, whether that's a lot to gain, a lot to lose reputationally, a lot to lose financially. There's a lot to consider here. And with the playoffs right around the corner and these sort of significant impacts hanging over players, coaches, and teams, wanted to talk a little bit about who some of those players were that we think are maybe have the most on the line in the postseason. So, Tom, why don't you get us started? Who to you is somebody that has an awful lot on the line riding on this postseason?
The number one guy on my list is JAYSON Tatum. JAYSON Tatum to me is kind of in this zone right now where we don't really know how good he is. We don't, even though we've seen him in the playoffs so many times. And I think through his career, he's played, how many seasons now is it? Like he's, let's see here. It's seven seasons. Yeah. And every season he's, except with the exception one, well, this one, he hasn't had his postseason yet. He's been in the playoffs every single season of his career. And we still kind of feel like, okay, is he the number one on a championship team?
Right.
We don't know that. And whether that's a fake concept, like the idea of being a number one on a championship team, we kind of feel like with the chips onto the table right now, the Boston Celtics are the favorite. They're about to win, 65 games this season? And he's not an MVP. He's not in the MVP conversation. But I feel like with his crunch time woes in the playoffs the last few years, that is really the only thing standing between them and a championship, in my opinion, is I think they roll against the Miami Heat the last couple of years if they get some really strong play out of JAYSON Tatum in those big moments. And clutch can be very fickle. I laugh at like Skip Bayless and the whole idea of a clutch gene. I'm not trying to say that he doesn't have the clutch gene, even though 2 big numbers ago, I pointed out that his efficiency in big moments is some of the worst over the last 3 seasons, regular season and postseason, compared to his all NBA peers. And Jaylen Brown is actually way more efficient. So if you haven't checked that out, the big numbers debut a couple weeks ago got a lot of flack from the New England contingency, which
they're normally pretty nuanced and chill about that kind of conception of their players. So I was kind of surprised by that.
Yeah, very surprised about Boston in that sense. They're usually, as soon they're really campaigning for Marcus Smart as like the greatest defender in the NBA, and then when they get Drew Holiday, they're like, wait, no. Love this guy, Drew. Let's sign him to an extension. By the way, we didn't really talk about that whole aspect of like the Drew Holiday extension. Is like, do they still prefer, Marcus Smart, the Defensive Player of the Year award winner a couple years ago, which I laughed at that when it happened, and now I don't know. He had a tough year injury wise. This is a detour. JAYSON Tatum is number one on my list.
Sure, it's a completely valid pick. The reputational stakes, like this team has everything it needs, right? Like the Celtics enter Thursday with the 5th largest average margin of victory ever, according to StatHead.
Right. Yeah.
The four teams ahead of them all won the title, and those teams are all like Mount Rushmore type teams. The 72 Lakers that won 33 straight, the Kareem and Oscar 71 Bucks, the 72 win 96 Bulls, and the first year of Durant on the Warriors. Those are the only teams that have a better point differential to this point than these Celtics. They're going to have home court advantage in every series they play. The Celtics, as you mentioned, the playoffs every year of Tatum's career, more postseason wins than anybody but the Warriors in that span in Tatum's career. They've done everything but win a title. And so this is it. This is what's left. And the organization has put everything around Tatum and the Tatum Brown core to put it in position to finally reach the top of that particular mountain. And there's a million reasons why maybe they don't get there, right? Like the reality, and as you mentioned with the way that Tatum's evaluated compared to his peers, is like he's just not quite at that level. Like he's in the MVP conversation to the extent that it is he 5th? That is the place in the conversation he occupies, because I think most observers look at it and say, in terms of just like individual ability or individual production, he is not at the level of Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's not at the level of Nikola Jokic. He's not at the level of Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Insert players here. Joel Embiid. He has had more success collectively than almost all those guys, except for Jokic, obviously. And maybe some of that, Ben Golliver, our old buddy, mentioned this on Divine Intervention on Tuesday. Like, Tatum deserves some credit for pulling back to make more space for all these other guys to play to the level that they have, and sort of take the reins of the team in that way. But when rubber meets the road in these late season games, in these biggest moments of the season, those guys have been the ones to elevate their teams, and Tatum has yet to do that, with the exceptions, and they're significant real exceptions, of 46 in Game 6 in Milwaukee, right, in 2022, and 51 in Game 7 against the Sixers last year. Like, he's done that in playoff games, just not at the championship level. And so for him to be in that set of circumstances, everything will be judged by that. You're absolutely right. Wonderful season, historic regular season. Ask how that went for Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell in Salt Lake City, right?
Yeah.
That without a conference finals or a finals or a title, doesn't get you too far. So Tatum is a huge one on that list. For me, I'm going to zag a little bit because I know we share some folks on our list. Basically, I just mentioned Donovan Mitchell, the Cavs' big four. This is there's reasons, there's explanations for why Cleveland has struggled the last month. The biggest one is Donovan Mitchell's missed 15 games since the beginning of March, right? He's had injuries, the bone bruise, I believe, in the left knee that needed PRP treatment, broke his nose, friendly fire on a rebound. He's been out of the lineup. He's their number one guy. They're going to struggle. I understand that. But the specifics and the context surrounding that team, they looked great when it was Mitchell and Jared Allen. They've looked great when it's Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. They've looked when all four guys are together. And they went from, I think it was 26-8 in 34 games heading into the All-Star break to 11-17 since it. And now they're in a position again where they could finish as high as second. They could drop down. If they go into the first round and get punched in the mouth again, it just feels like a distinct possibility. I have some real, there's got to be some deja vu vibes about if they draw Orlando in the first round, and it's welcome to a team that's just going to beat the hell out of you for, as long as the series lasts, and then see if you are up for it or not. If they get punched in the mouth again and they don't walk through it and survive round one, you kind of feel like management's got to look at the construction of it, right? And wonder, is this what we want to build everything around? And that's a tough place to be, given how successful in the regular season they've been these past couple of seasons, how optimistic everyone was even 2 months ago. That's a tough spot to be in right now, but I think it's the spot that they are in. Yeah,
great pick there. And I think JB Bickerstaff in there too is that he's, I think, a really great coach. But if you can't get those four players to perform at their optimal state and win with that kind of talent under your roof, it feels like everything could be on the table for this team. And Dan Gilbert coming out and saying, "Yeah, we're gonna sign this dude to an extension," and Donovan Mitchell's like, "You know what? No comment on that." Feels like there's a lot of weight on these guys' shoulders, and to your point, they could prove everyone wrong and be like, "Yeah, we're gonna make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals here," and put all of those concerns to rest. Another team in the East here, we've got Jayson Tatum and then basically the Cavs' big four. I will throw out Damian Lillard as another one. Not just I feel like the Giannis injury lets him off the hook a little bit, but the trade demand out of Portland, then going to Milwaukee, then Adrian Griffin gets fired. The blood isn't on Damian Lillard's hands. But right. I think when you look at the fact that he doesn't have a championship, but Giannis does, they trade Drew Holiday, who won a championship with the team. They bring in Doc Rivers to kind of fix this thing. And then now Giannis gets hurt. And that's the thing where it kind of, I think, gives Damian Lillard a little bit of, dials down the temperature a little bit on Damian Lillard. Because if they flame out in the first or second round, I think you can realistically imagine that a lot of that will be due to Giannis's calf strain, whether he comes back and he's not himself, or he doesn't come back and it's the Dame Bobby Portis show and it doesn't hit the same way. if Giannis wasn't hurt, Dan, would you put him above JAYSON Tatum on your list?
Dame, yeah, I mean, because you're absolutely, I mean, the thing that you highlighted, he does not have the pelts on the wall, right? Like even Doc, right? Like Doc Rivers, I know you had written at the Finder a couple months ago, like about the perception of Doc Rivers versus the reality, and like the way that he's talked about his reputational, the game of tennis, about whether he's like over respected or under respected, is an interesting one given his resume, but. Doc has won a title and has led teams deep into the playoffs. Giannis has won a title. All of the other core guys in Milwaukee have all won it. Dame's the one coming to the party a little light. And the whole point was our offense, especially in the half court and especially in crunch time, dies too often late in these games. You are the Band-Aid for that. You are the tourniquet for that wound. And it's been up and down kind of all season. And so it hasn't looked exactly the way we expected it to on the box, right? It hasn't matched the picture that you got in the store. And if they fall short and it continues to look roughly the way it has during the regular season, a little fits and startsy, the streaky shooting, all that kind of stuff, then yeah, I think Dame wears that to a different degree because he's the, like last guy in the door, fairly or unfairly. So I think you're right to note the temperature goes down a little bit. Everyone's expectations get ratcheted down when your best guy is, hobbled to some degree again. And it remains to be seen how much that will be, the severity of the strain. I know our guy, Jeff Stotts at In Street Clothes had suggested like the average length of time for an exit or duration of an injury for this, usually about like 2.5 weeks. That, maybe he's back in the middle of the first round, remains to be seen. We'll see, and in what form he is when he comes back, how explosive he can be, all that kind of stuff. But if the flip side of it is, and I know Dame has had some really big games this season when Giannis has been out. If Giannis is out or Giannis is limited and Dame goes nuts and they
carries them, yep.
Yeah, they do win a series. They do win 2 series. They get to a conference finals. 2 conference finals on your resume looks a lot different than 1. And the circumstances in which he would be elevating them, I think, burnish his bona fides a little bit. So I think that's a good choice.